Hi there, happy Tuesday. This week's topic is one of self awareness combined with some self compassion. And don't turn it off. I know. Self compassion is a tricky subject for some of us. Sometimes we think that if we're too compassionate, that we will be lazy and not succeed anymore, or all these things, but when I talk about self-compassion, we've talked about this whole idea of like toxic positivity before when I was talking about gratitude, and it's the same exact thing with self-compassion. When I'm talking about self-compassion, I'm not talking about fake positives. I'm not talking about like trying to put lipstick on a pig, right? Like, I'm not trying to make things come into fruition or into your mind that aren't real. What we're really talking about with both gratitude and self compassion is looking at the facts. Let's look at the facts. When we get away from judgments, when we get away from assumptions, when we get away from shoulds, when we get away from, that self-talk that can be really, really harsh, when we take away those things that we wouldn't do for other people in the same way, or that people don't do for us in the same way, like those big heavy judgments and the constant judgments that we can sometimes do with ourselves, when we remove all of that, then we get to reality. So self-compassion is not about making stuff up to make yourself feel better. It's about taking away the garbage that's making you feel worse than you need to. Because when we feel bad about ourselves, we make poor choices. We make choices that are not necessarily healthy, don't necessarily take into consideration the whole picture, don't necessarily take into consideration the long-term repercussions. We get into that, make this thing stop mode. So that instant gratification, that instant relief, and all of those things. Those are the things that, like, avoidance and procrastination are all made of, these inner thoughts, the garbage that isn't even true, these stories we tell ourselves. So what do we do about this? Most of us have particular things about ourselves that we would like to do, think, act differently, right? Most of us have tendencies that we would like to improve, that we would like to see different. And so oftentimes we see these things come up over and over again. We think we get a handle on it, we make some changes, and then they pop back up again, right? So when we're talking about self-compassion or reality, it is important to ask ourselves a few questions when we do find ourselves beating ourselves up for having these tendencies, these emotional habits, these verbal habits, these behavioral habits. When we have these bad habits, these habits that we want to change, it's important to ask ourselves the right types of questions when we want to take a look at them and see how we want to act, right? See how valid they really are. And two of the biggest questions that we can ask ourselves are, one is, if someone else was telling me this story about themselves, if my bestie was telling me exactly the same story I'm telling myself, what would I tell her? What advice would I give her? What observations would I have about this story that she's telling? How much of it is truth? How much of it is judgment? How much of it is measurable or not? How much of it is just pure dark opinion, right? And then the second question is, do you really believe, like, what percentage of the world population do you think engages in the same thought patterns, emotional patterns, behavioral patterns that you have? Is it really that terrible that you are the only person in the whole world, or the worst possible person in the entire world at this? Or can we suspect that there is a decent percentage of the population that also engages in those same emotional, verbal, behavioral habits? And so therefore, it must not be the absolute worst thing in the world. If more than one person is engaging in this, that means that there is a reason for it, and you're not alone. That doesn't mean that you can't do anything about it, but putting it in perspective will allow you to take stronger movements towards change. When you feel like you are the only person in the world or the worst person in the world at something, it makes it really hard to change, because what it says is, you're screwed. There's nothing you could do about it. Like, I'm the only person, I'm alone. There's nothing out there to help me, or I'm the absolute worst at this. And so that's just who I am. It's closed to possibilities. But when we make the realization that we're not alone, that there are millions of other people on earth that have a very similar or same tendency or habit or whatever it is, that opens us up to possibilities. That means that there's nothing wrong or bad or broken about you. You're just entering into this tendency. And it has also worked for other people, just like it has worked for you in the past. And now you want to change it. And other people are on that same journey, which means there are things that you can do. You are not alone. You're not bad. You're not broken. You are a whole, beautiful human being that just wants to tweak some of your actions, thoughts, emotions, or worries. So keep those questions in mind, asking yourself, what would someone else say about the same exact situation? And what percentage of the population on Earth do you feel might be suffering or might be dealing with the same thing as you? And if it's more than just one other person, if it's more than zero, we know that there are things that you could do about it. We know that you're not alone, you're not broken, and it's totally okay. So let me know what you think, and let me know if you need some help even identifying, what the root of some of these things are, because that can be a part of what's happening too. Is maybe as you've been working through it throughout the years, we haven't gotten down to the root. We've gotten to some symptomy and some surfacey things, but you might need help getting right down to the root of the issue, which happens to be one of my superpowers. So if you are struggling with that, be sure to give me a call or send me an email, and I will see you next week.